Welcome back to the channel. This video is on environmental science and air and water pollution, and we're focused on acid rain. So we're going to define acid rain, we're going to look at the pH scale, we're going to look at the effects of acid rain both in the atmosphere and the terrestrial environments and biomes such as the soil, the effect on biomass, vegetation, the effect on water sources both surface and subsurface, and also looking at the regulations used to decrease the amount of acid rain produced, and also the long-term methods to reduce acid rain in the first place. Acid rain, by definition, is precipitation which has had interactions with gases in the atmosphere to form chemical reactions resulting in a more acidic precipitation than normal, and as it falls to the ground through gravity is going to interact with the Earth's surface, both the aquatic marine environments and also the terrestrial environments. Historically, acid rain has been implied or linked to a change in environment since the mid-1600s, but in 1852 a Scottish chemist called Robert Angus Smith coined the phrase acid rain, and since the 20th century, in the 1900s, they started to link up and connect the dots between the environmental degradation and the increase in acidity in precipitation. For example, in 1924, there was industrial emissions in England that was linked to a decrease in crops and a change in the lake environment. And then in 1950 in Scandinavia, they linked the change to the lake environment or the acidity of the lake to the number of fish and the fish population in that lake. So the increased acidity would result in a decrease in fish population. And then in America, during the 1950s and 60s, extensive investigations were conducted on the effect of acid rain on ecological environments and the effect on vegetation and crops and the living environment and the biotic factors, and identified emerging problems with the increasing levels of acidity in precipitation. One area in particular was the Adirondack Mountains in the northeastern part of the US, and the problems of the prevailing winds from the Great Lakes and the industrial areas and the effect it had on these mountainous and forest regions to the east. Then in 1972, an American ecologist, Gene Likens, was one of the first scientists to push acid rain as a global term, a scientific and environmental problem in which the United Nations took note of and included it into their Conference for the Human Environment. As discussed previously, acid rain is all about the pH scale and the acidity or alkalinity of a solution. It could be water or any different type of solution. The pH scale was first introduced in 1909 by a biochemist called Sorensen from a beer company called Carlsberg in Copenhagen, Denmark. Now, I personally love Carlsberg and have been to Copenhagen myself. It's a beautiful European city. Now, the pH scale goes from 0 to 14. 0 to 6 is acidic or acid solution. Neutral is 7, and anything above 7 to 14, so 8 to 14 would be alkali or base. Now, this is a scale based on the power of hydrogen ions, or the concentration of hydrogen ions, based on sampling a solution and achieving a number on this scale which would correlate to the solution being either acidic, neutral, or alkali. Now, this scale is also logarithmic, which means that a change in the scale number, let's say 1 to 2 in the acidic scale of pH, that will be a 10 times change in concentration. So if there is an increase in concentration of hydrogen ions in that solution, the pH would decrease and it becomes more acidic. So for example, if we have a solution of pH 12, which is alkali, and we increase or add hydrogen ions into that solution, it would decrease in number on the pH scale and become more acidic. On the flip side, if the solution decreases in concentration of hydrogen ions, then there's an increase in the pH number scale, and it become less acidic and more alkali or more base. So generally, the US drinking water ranges between pH 6.5 up to pH 8.5. So around that slightly acidic to slightly alkali pH number. The lowest ever recorded pH in a solution was in Scotland in 1983, which was pH 1.87, and in the US it was 2.83, which was some precip that was measured in around the Great Lakes. There are three gases associated with acid rain in the atmosphere, and they are CO2, SO2, and NO2. The CO2 is carbon dioxide, the SO2 is sulfur dioxide, and the NO2 is nitrogen dioxide. Now, all of these gases are naturally occurring and have a balanced or equilibrium concentration within the atmosphere that has been consistent for a very long time. Now, the addition of anthropogenic sources of these gases, the addition of excess CO2, excess SO2, and excess NO2 are what we're going to discuss here with acid rain. But let's start with carbon. Now, carbon dioxide currently has a concentration amount of 423 parts per million. Now that equates to 0.000423 as a decimal. So as an overall amount in the atmosphere, it is a small percentage. However, it plays an integral role in the chemical reactions within our atmosphere. Now, these chemical reactions include CO2 chemically reacting with water in the atmosphere, H2O, and that will create a product of carbonic acid, a weak acid, which is H2CO3 in solution, or aqueous, or AQ. Now, this carbonic acid is going to chemically break down in the atmosphere and photodissociate with the energy and sunlight to release hydrogen ions and hydrogen carbonate, which is HCO3, both in Aquarius. Now, this release of a hydrogen ion is very important, is integral when discussing acid rain, because this is what is going to add more hydrogen ions into the concentration in that solution, and that will lower the pH of that solution and increase the acidity of that solution. But there is a natural balance that the atmosphere and the planet has formed over a long time between CO2 and water, and how rainwater has a range of pH between 5.6 to 5.8, which is naturally a weak acid. Now, this works in terms of our environment, our ecosystem, our biogeochemical cycles have evolved to function properly on this range of pH because of the addition of CO2 with water as a chemical reaction within our atmosphere. So precipitation is going to have or be a slightly weak acid as it falls to the Earth's surface. The next atmospheric gas we're going to talk about is sulfur, which exists as SO2 or sulfur dioxide. And when this gas is going to chemically react with the oxygen, O2, in the atmosphere, you get the formation of SO3, which is sulfur trioxide. The tri meaning 3 oxygens. So sulfur trioxide, which is a gas, is going to again chemically react in the atmosphere with water, H2O, and form sulfuric acid, which is H2SO4, which is in solution, Aquarius. This sulfuric acid is then going to break down again, just like the carbonic acid with carbon, and release the extra hydrogen ions into the solution, which is again going to lower the pH. And what's left is sulfate ion, which is HSO4 negative. The final gas is nitrogen, which exists as N2, nitrogen, plus oxygen, O2, which is 2NO, which is a gas. And then you have the addition of another nitrogen, which is formed through photodissociation, where the energy from sunlight is going to break down the N2 into single atomic nitrogens, and it's going to combine to make 3NO2, which is a gas, and that's going to chemically react again with water in the atmosphere to form a product of nitric acid, 2HNO3, again in solution. This nitric acid is going to break down and photodissociate in the atmosphere to release, again, hydrogen ions and nitrate ions, which is NO3 negative. And as stated, all of these gases that chemically react and form different compounds, when they break down in the atmosphere, whether it be the CO2, the SO2, the NO2, and how they form different compounds, when they break down and photodissociate in solution, you're going to release additional hydrogen ions into that solution, with the result of lowering the pH of that solution and increasing the acidity. So during precipitation, if you have additional CO2, SO2, or NO2 added in to the water and the chemical reactions that follow, you're going to naturally release more hydrogen ions and naturally lower the pH of that precipitation that's going to fall onto the Earth's surface and, again, chemically react due to the acidity with the Earth's surface, be it terrestrial or marine or aquatic environments. As discussed previously, precipitation is a slightly weak acid. For example, rain, snow, sleet, due to the natural release and natural cycling of carbon, nitrogen, and sulfur within the Earth's planetary system, which has formed these chemical reactions in the atmosphere between CO2, NO2, and SO2, which result in the release of hydrogen ions into solution, lowering the pH and increasing the acidity. And there is an equilibrium that has been achieved between this weak acid precipitation and the ecosystem, the environment, and the terrestrial and marine environments in which this precipitation is going to interact with. The natural sources of carbon, sulfur, and nitrogen, which chemically combine to form this weak acid precipitation in this natural system, originate from various sources, including volcanic eruptions, including the soil and bacterial activity, denitrification, including respiration from organic life forms, plant and animals, the decomposition of organic material, the weathering of rocks, and the release from organic biomass like manure. So acid rain is defined as solution which is more acidic than regular naturally occurring precipitation, which is a weak acid. Acid rain is below 4.5 pH, and this is caused by increased chemical reactions within the atmosphere involving sulfur, nitrogen, and carbon, which is going to release more hydrogen ions into the solution, lowering the pH and increasing acidity. Now, this comes from the addition of mostly sulfuric acid. About 3/4 of the acid rain is attributed to this compound, and also nitric acid, which makes up the other 20-25%. Now, the addition of these two compounds in the atmosphere is going to exponentially increase the amount of hydrogen ions in solution due to the formation and breakdown of these two compounds. Now, where do they come from? The sources of the nitrogen and sulfur include the fossil fuel industry, include incomplete combustion of fossil fuels, looking at the industrial sector, the energy sector, agricultural sector, transportation sector, all of which are going to use vast amounts and vast quantities of processes which result in the release of extra nitrogen dioxide and sulfur dioxide, creating through chemical reactions sulfuric acid and nitric acid. And these are responsible for lowering the pH and forming acid rain. This is the Earth Science Classroom. Thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, please subscribe, like, and share. And if you want more content and videos on Earth Science, please check out my channel.